Okay. All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gents. Welcome to you all. There's been a fantastic response to this afternoon's webinar, webinar Wednesday, I'm told. Welcome to everybody present, and specifically to our guest speaker this afternoon, Hermann du Plessis. But before I do that, I would like to acknowledge my colleagues from the various chambers of commerce who've made today possible, and their members who are present. So firstly, to the Business Ireland, South Africa, and our chairman, Johnny Green, to the Italian Chamber of Commerce, to the Portuguese Chamber of Commerce, to the executive directors, Rui Marto and Tony de Gouveia, welcome to you. To the Spanish Chamber of Commerce, Manola Sanchez, to the EU Chamber and the Swiss Chamber of Commerce members. So welcome to everybody. It's nice to have you here. My name is Mark Peters. I have an easy role this afternoon. I'm just going to welcome your guest speaker, do a quick introduction. The guest speaker this afternoon is Hermann du Plessis. I was asked to review Hermann's book, Lead with Intent, a very recent 2022 book. I enjoyed some of the frameworks a lot and engaged with Hermann through some of his lecturing colleagues, and asked him if he would be interested in presenting this afternoon. So what you're about to hear is Hermann's view on lead and leading with intent. And I'd like to welcome him. Hermann has written this book. He'll tell you about it in his last slide, Driving Engagement and Profitability. He is the managing director of a consulting company called Temba Tandeka. He has a BCom, MEd, higher education diploma. He's in the education space. And Hermann, it's wonderful to have you with us. Thank you. Hermann is happy to take questions as we go along. You can either post them on the chat box or put your hand up. I have told him if he's in full flight, I will manage that for him. And we have allowed time at the end of this afternoon session. So Hermann plans to finish within around 40 minutes, and we've allowed 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. So if there's any questions, you can post them, or you can put your hand up and we'll give you a shout at an appropriate time. So welcome everybody. I know there were one or two people that were confused by the invitation, because it seems to have been passed around quite a bit. There was a substantial uptake for this afternoon, so I will let those people in. I'm going to ask you to mute your microphones if you don't mind. You're very welcome to leave your cameras on should you wish, but if you could mute your microphones if you wouldn't mind until you ask a question. So Hermann, welcome on behalf of the various chambers of commerce. Nice to have you with us. I hope you're still there, Hermann. Lost sight of you there for a while.
I'm still here. I'm
still here. Okay, off you go. Hermann has got a very nice jacket on. It's the first time I've seen him wearing a jacket. He has to have the jacket back by 4:10, so we'll try and finish on time. Thanks, Hermann.
It's a rental.
You're very welcome, Hermann.
Thanks. I'm just going to share my slide deck with you guys. I'm hoping you can see that. Just let me know if you can't. Can you see that, Mark?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Okay, great stuff. So, Mark, you'll stop me if there's any pressing questions. I don't mind being interrupted. I think to start off, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you guys today, and also just want to acknowledge the different chambers of commerce, Swiss, Italian, Spanish, and then the Portuguese, Mr. Tony de Gouveia, also Johnny Green, the chair of Business Ireland, South Africa, and then Rui Marto, who's the chair of the EU chapter. It's wonderful to have this opportunity, and I really believe I have good news to share. And Mark took me through a thorough vetting process, so hopefully I won't be wasting your time this afternoon. And we could really learn a lot together in this time together. So maybe just a little bit of background about how the book came to be. And if I tell that story, I've got to tell you about our business and who we are. Tevatandeka is an organizational behavior consultancy. So basically, our role is to serve our clients by assisting them to cultivate environments that create value. So it's the interplay between the individual teams and the organizations and the different systems in a company. That's our speciality, and that's where we focus. But as a business for the last 2 decades, we've really been obsessed with this question: what really makes a difference in business? And what we found is some teams and some companies just outperform their peers. Every time we see it, they adjust quicker, they work smarter, they're more innovative, they deal with failure in a healthy and helpful way, and they know how to handle conflict productively, because conflict's always there. And lastly, they embrace new opportunities without dropping the ball on current commitments. And the one consistent factor we found with these teams who outperform others is engagement. Engagement plays a major factor when it comes to what really makes a difference in the productivity and the success of your business. Now, a lot of engagement specialists out there struggle to give you a definition of engagement. We believe engagement is the strength of the relationship between an organization, the teams, and its employees. And we feel the best definition out there is from Ken Uhle, who used to be Aon's global culture and engagement practice leader. He's now with Facebook or Meta. He says the concept of employee engagement is really about an employee's psychological investment in their organizations and motivation to produce extraordinary results. So basically, when your employees come to work, do they volunteer their skills, the best of what they have, to your business? Or is it a struggle for your employees to come to work every single day? Why is this important? And it's 3 basic things. We've discovered it, but it's backed by research. Number 1, engagement is important because it impacts your bottom line. And every business owner, every shareholder wants to hear that. Very important. There's a direct link between staff engagement and higher profitability. And the reason you have higher profitability with staff engagement is you provide a better customer service. So the employees are more engaged, and engaged employees take ownership of your business, and therefore they provide a superior service. And lastly, it's a great place to work at. People are engaged, they're motivated, they feel safe, they find meaning, they build great relationships, and they work as a team, and they become loyal citizens of your organization. So basically, it works the other way around as well. If you take a look at these 3 points, if people are engaged, they provide a great service to your customers, which means you have repeat customers, which leads to more profitability or higher profitability at the end of the day. So there's a lot of research to back this. I mean, guys, you are going to receive the slides as well. You're more than welcome to take a look at the facts and the figures I've got here. Just take a look at this purple stat over here at the right, at the bottom. Organizations with low employee engagement scores have 18% lower productivity, 16% lower profitability, 37% lower job growth, and 65% lower share price. I mentioned that because a lot of people feel if I invest money in my employees, there's not going to be enough money for my shareholders at the end of the day. But research study after research study provides data, that proves the opposite, is that if you do invest in employee engagement and to get your employees more engaged, what you have is a share price that will rise. So if you want to take care of all constituencies in your business, all stakeholders in your business, a priority should be staff engagement, and that's very important. So as a business, what do? We train, consult, and coach organizations in the essential skills to raise engagement. So we offer value to our customers through engagement analysis, training, consulting, and coaching within the sphere of organizational behavior. What are we known for? We've built a reputation as a catalyst that guide organizations towards an increase, a sustainable increase in their profitability. We do this by assisting them with the one aspect in their business that contributes most to their profitability, and that is staff engagement. We are obsessed with staff engagement, and that's why our book is called Lead with Intent, Leadership Principles and Practices that Drive Engagement and Profitability. So how do we help our customers? Firstly, we analyze engagement levels, then we develop customized solutions, and then we facilitate the execution by aligning your talent with your strategy. So engagement does not happen by accident. We've developed a very practical framework. And what I want to do for the first 10 to 15 minutes is just talk about the practical framework of engagement and then dive into the cornerstone of engagement, which are these 9 leadership principles and practices that we've put into the book. But this is our model, and it is most probably the most comprehensive staff engagement model out there. I've looked at all the major consulting houses in the world, spoke to many of my colleagues at business schools, spoke to our competitors. I'm even confident that our model is more comprehensive than anything that Gallup has produced as well. So, we're fairly confident that it offers a lot of value to our customers. And I think the story of how we got to the model, I'll explain to you now, but it starts with the cornerstone of leadership right there. What we have noticed is that if we find a company where the engagement levels are really high, you will find a leadership that is very intentional. Nothing happens by accident. And usually that philosophy of the leadership is rooted in servant leadership. We've worked with many of our customers who have a very warped idea of what servant leadership is. Servant leadership in its simplest form is tough on results, but soft on people. So you never lose the focus on results as a servant leader. And we've worked with some of the toughest leaders out there who are servant leaders because they really drive the business towards profitability. And they know to do that, they have to be servant leaders and lead people from that philosophy. So the servant leader takes enough time to put the needs of his people ahead of his own. And I really think that's needed now in South Africa if we take a look at the leadership culture in our country. So in working with these leaders over the last 2 decades, we have identified 9 principles and practices that really profoundly impacts the culture of the organization. And these are the 9 that we've then got in the book. I'm going to run through each of these a little bit later. But let me just explain then Lead with Intent. The book is about the 9 principles and practices to drive engagement. And then the result is 3 things. You keep your talent, you keep your customers, and your business becomes more profitable. And then a lot of people ask us, but what's the proof for this? And that's where the book and the whole engagement model comes from. In 2007, we were contracted by a major corporate financial institution, and we worked very hard to fix their 3rd biggest division. It really was a tough job. This division had a high staff turnover. The costs were exorbitant. They really cost this institution a lot of money, and we were asked to assist. We worked with the executives, we worked with the senior management in this division, and we really learned a lot from them. And then in 2013, we were asked to expand our work into the other 18 countries in Africa where they are operational, and the results were great. And what actually happened is that last year, this division of this financial institution got a 97% rating for staff engagement. So Google is world standard at 83%. This division within this massive organization, they rated at 97%, which is more than double the engagement level of the rest of the employees in the organization. So they came to us and said, guys, what did you do in this division to fix this division and to get the engagement levels at 97%? And by the way, these guys don't only enjoy working with each other, they also deliver a great service to customers because they got a 93% customer satisfaction rating. And this was their own objective internal analysis. That was not our analysis. Our analysis, when we ran it, we got the same numbers, but this was objective. This was their own internal analysis. So what we did is, since 2016, we reverse engineered everything we did, and we came up with the model that I just showed you. And then we went and we tested the model in 15 different companies. We did a bit of a research study. We developed questionnaires to see which questionnaires are effective. And once we ended up with a questionnaire that we felt really worked for the module, we went and we tested the module in 2 small SMEs over the last 3 years. The one SME, their turnover in 2019 was 17 million Rand a year, and that grew to 32 million this year, which was remarkable. We also worked with an international appliance maker, from Europe. Their turnover in South Africa was 180 million. We did the engagement survey with them. We ran some interventions for them. I think they spent about 400,000 Rand on the interventions, and their turnover grew to 340 million for the last financial year. So the managing directors of these 2 companies were very gracious, and they said, Tema Tandeka, since you became involved in our company, that we got these results. But the reality is they did have very favorable market conditions, both of these companies. And we did challenge the managing directors with that to say, look, it wasn't all us. Look at the markets, look at what happened to you. But both MDs said the following to us, is that we ensured that they really capitalized on the opportunities that came their way. And I think sometimes so many smaller businesses miss out on opportunities because their people aren't ready to capitalize on these opportunities. So this is what we've put into the book and why we developed the book, really to help people out there to get their staff more engaged. The feedback we are getting is that the book is practical, profound, easy to read, and it's a great tool. So that book is all about those 9 principles, and I'll dive into more detail a little bit later. I'm just watching my time here. Also, part of the foundation of our engagement model is culture. So leadership is the 9 principles and practices. Culture, 4 things important for us when we look at culture for engagement. Firstly, is the management style in the organization. Is it a coaching management style? I think a very directive management style is very old school. If you are a directive manager, you don't allow people to think for themselves and to act for themselves and to take ownership. So we've actually developed what we call a coaching management style and a coaching management framework that we take to our clients. I know a lot of our clients, they train their managers to become coaches. I really think that's the wrong way to go. What I think you must do is take your managers and just add some coaching skills to their management toolkit, which really helps in an organization. We also look at intentional meetings. I can say a lot about that. I also discussed this model in the first chapter of the book, by the way, so you can read in more detail about that. Frontline obsession, we know that sometimes the guys who deal with the customers on the front line, they don't have any say in the strategy of the company, and that leads to a terrible culture because everything is forced down from the top. And then just a culture of listening and being open and listening to our teams is very important. Strategy, we do a lot of strategy work. Our strategy framework is very simple. it drives execution. And we have the saying that if you want your strategy to have action, it must be remembered. For it to be remembered, it must be understood. For it to be understood, it must be simple. So we have a very simple framework that we help our customers with, and it's all about cascading that strategy. So it's translating and reinterpreting the strategy of the company on each management level of the organization. So guiding employees to align personal work goals with the strategic goals of the organization is very important, and that leads to greater accountability, and that is exactly what you want. Just maybe a short story here. This big financial institution I spoke about, what we realized with them is the first interaction with their brand is the security staff. So what we did for this organization is actually strategic cascading all the way down to the security guards working for this company. And a lot of these guards were outsourced, but we really helped those guards to understand that you are the primary interaction with the brand of this organization. And what does that mean for you as a security guard? And how do you align yourself with the strategic goals of this major organization? And that was a great exercise to do. We worked with so many security managers across the continent to get this done, and that was a wonderful project for us, and the results were really great. So training and development is the next part. On the second tier of our model, a lot of money is being spent on training and development, a lot of money, and we really feel a lot of it is wasted because it's not aligned with the strategy of the company. We sometimes get a request to come and do emotional intelligence training or conflict management training, and we always ask our customers why. Tell us what the strategy is, why you need this training. What we also do, which I think is really important, is whenever we do training for our customers, we make sure we communicate the strategy first, and then we tell them why the training is important for the strategy. Next part of the model on the second tier is the human capital team. I think sometimes, HR is so busy with hiring and firing that they really don't get to what they need to do, which is the development of talent. And how do you get human capital to align themselves strategically with the business that they are serving? And it's really about helping human capital to see their role as serving the various divisions or business units in an organization, which I think is very important. If people don't feel they have that kind of support from HR or the human capital division, they usually disengage at work. Business partners, internal stakeholders. I think those of you who work in bigger organizations, you will know that breaking down the silos is so important. We do a lot of work in what we call compassionate collaboration. If you take a look at how strategy and structure of big companies are changing, everybody's talking about ecosystems. The only way to survive in a business ecosystem is through compassionate collaboration. And then a big part is service level agreements, because those are the boundaries. If we have a clear service level agreement in terms of how we serve each other, I think that's really important going forward and breaking down the silos. Service providers, we have seen many employees disengage because of the service providers they need to work with. So the first thing we try and figure out there is what's the balance of power? Is the service provider or the company have the power? Is the service provider strategically aligned as an extension of your business? And then do you provide training for service providers so that they can really become an extension of your business and act as if they are a part of your business, which we think is really important. Right, legitimacy, this is an interesting one, but the more we worked with our customers, the more we realized that people have a need to explain why they have a right to exist, why they are important to the company, why they are relevant, why their team is relevant. So we saw a lot of outsourcing happen in the corporate environment in South Africa in the last couple of years. We've seen companies make big mistakes, outsourcing the wrong teams, and then having to bring them back into the company later at a great cost. And why do we outsource the wrong teams? We outsource them because we don't realize what their value is, because they don't talk about their value. So what we do for our customers is help the different teams sell their contribution at the right forums and meetings so that their value is clear to see for all, which is really, really important. It really saves you a lot of money if you don't outsource the wrong people. You've got to outsource the right people, and there's a way to look at that as well. And then finally, right at the top of the pyramid, and this is where most engagement surveys focus, and we only make that one of 9 parts in our engagement survey, is individual staff engagement. People need 5 things to engage, and I'll start at the bottom. Firstly, they need professional development. Help me to develop skills. I mean, upskilling and reskilling is so important. 40% of the jobs being done today will be automated in the next 4 years, according to the latest survey that I saw of the Institute for the Future. And remember, we don't want to automate jobs and eliminate people. We want to elevate people when we automate jobs. We want to give them something better to do, which I think is important. I teach that slogan to all of my customers now. Forget about eliminating people. It's about elevating people. So how do we upskill and reskill? And that's important. Number 5, if people know you're going to give me better skills so that I have a better job in future, they'll never leave your business. Employee rewards, it's got to be market related. You can't expect to not pay your people and give them the rewards that they can get from competitors to hang around. Personal development. This is an interesting one with Generation Y and Generation Z, or as the Americans say, Z, coming into the workplace. Personal development has moved up the pecking order to number 3. It used to be number 5. It's now number 3. People really want you to make them a better human being. So give me skills to become a better parent, to be a better partner at home, to deal with my finances better. So people really want you to develop them personally as individuals as well. Then relationships. I mean, a fascinating study for me. The Center for Creative Leadership interviewed 438,000 leaders in the top 7,700 companies of the world and asked them one question: why are you successful as a leader? And 71% of them said, my ability to build and maintain relationships over prolonged periods of time. I mean, that is crucial for us. We see a lot of people say no to 100, 200, 300,000 rands a year more because they like the relationships that they've built in a specific company and they hang around. Meaning, people want meaning at work. Very, very important. So how do you help people find meaning in what they do? And that's where strategic cascading plays a major role to show people why they are relevant in the organization. So that's the entire model. For this model, we have 50 questions. It's a digital survey. It takes you approximately 10 minutes to complete. And then we get the results and we scratch on them and we try and figure out what's happening in your company. This is a listed JSE company. We have a permission to use their results. I'm not going to tell you who the company is, though. So this is how we've measured. They asked us to look at their top senior management, middle management, junior management, all their sales reps, and all the guys in admin, that's finance and HR. So these were their results. What we then do for customers is we build beautiful dashboards. We slice and dice the data, show it to you in different ways, and just show you what it is that we picked up when it comes to staff engagement in your organization. So for example, here we have the 9 leadership principles and practices that we've measured here for the company. And then you can go and take a look at how the executive managers fared, the middle managers, the finance and admin team, and the sales teams. So that's basically how the engagement survey works. And then we roll out interventions to help people with that. Right, I don't know if there's any questions on the engagement survey per se before I dive into the 9 principles and practices of the book. I'm also going to tell you a couple of stories about those principles and practices as well. Mark, any pressing questions? Sorry, I can't hear you then.
Yeah, sorry, Herman. There are three quick questions, Herman. The first one is from John Murphy at BISA. He says, Herman, in organizations, there is normally a range of engagement from totally engaged to actively destructive, which is often done in subtle and hidden ways. And then the question to you is, how do you recommend organizations continuously identify the actively destructive and appropriately manage them?
Yep.
Tough question.
Well, that is a tough question, but I think it's a very important question, Mark, because if you take a look at the impact of those destructive employees on your company, it's massive. If you take a look at research, I know in America, they reckon they lose $1 trillion a year in lost productivity because of destructive employees. And sometimes it's passive aggressive, you don't actually spot it initially. So, I mean, that's a great question. And that's why we get the big bucks, Mark, because we solve those problems. No, I'm just kidding. It's so important to make managers aware of the behavior of disengaged employees. And what our tool does is it just shows managers of certain teams that, hey, your guys are totally disengaged because of these reasons, and let's fix it. And once we start working with the teams, they sometimes hold each other accountable and say, but you're disengaged. And that helps us a lot, because then we don't have to be the bad guys and speak to individuals, but the team amongst themselves sort those problems out as well. Once we identify, and sometimes our clients do it, they say to us, look, we have this team, it's causing us a lot of problems in our company. Can you run the survey just for this team? Let's try and figure out where the problem is. So if you make your managers aware of the behavior and what the different forms of disengagement could look like in terms of behavior, I think that goes a long way. And that's just a short answer
to a complex question. Yeah.
Yes.
So two other quick ones. The nine variables, and I know you're going to look at the principles now. Where did you get those from originally? We understand the research that was done, Herman, but where did these originally come from?
They originally came from the discussions we had with executive and senior managers. And these are the 9 things that continually popped up in the research. So as we did the interviews with these guys, and we booked ourselves into a hotel for a whole week to have conversations from the morning to the evening in like a conference room to really get to the bottom of that. And once we figured those out, we packaged them on different levels on how they play out in the different teams as well.
Okay.
So, we can benchmark our model with various other models as well. And then obviously we've got the research to back every one of those 9 dimensions of engagement as well.
Right.
But we did not, we did a lot of work with other engagement models in the past. But these 9 aspects and dimensions, the way they came to us was out of those conversations we had with executive and senior managers.
So Herman came up with sort of 9 themes through the interviews that you did.
That's it.
Great.
That's it.
I know you want to get moving. I've got 3. There's some questions being added, Herman, but that's what we wanted. Why is personal development the domain of the company? We understand that professional development fits squarely with leaders, but you mentioned personal development and that it had moved up the hierarchy. Why is that the domain of the organization?
I think it's an expectation of the younger generation. And I think it's an expectation because they are consumers. Generation Y and Z are, they are brought up as consumers, and I think that's the expectation they have. The expectation is, if I spend so much time at work and you expect me to put in these hours, you must help me develop as a human being as well. I think that's the one reason. I think the second reason is technology. People don't socialize as much as they used to in the past. So people spend a lot more time on devices, and I think they are not as involved in the community as they were, where they could get that personal development.
Right.
There's a lack of it. I mean, if you take a look at community engagement, religious organization engagement, everything is going down. So there is a lack of social development. And I think where those personal skills and personal life skills developed in the past, people are expected that, you should teach that to them at work. I mean, we ran a course the other day for 600 people called Maximize Your Money, which is basic personal budgeting. And it's an organization that works with your money, by the way. So, and it was funny for us to go in and teach guys who work with our money about their money. But that's the expectation,
Carmen from Tiger Brands asked, culture, what would that entail in the assessment? And I'm guessing the background to that is that culture is not in your list of 9 principles.
Culture is. It's one of the foundational aspects. I mean, if I can just go back quickly, let's see. Culture is right at the bottom here. The model is, so culture is one of them over there that we look at. For us, we look at, when it comes to culture and engagement, these leadership principles create a certain culture. And I mean, that's something I forgot to say in the beginning. This model is an integrated model. So we actually cannot divide and divorce these dimensions from each other, but we do that to better understand the complexity of engagement. So these 9 principles and practices will have a major impact on the culture of your organization. But the 4 things we measure in our assessment when it comes to culture is, firstly, the management style. Is it a coaching management style, or is it a directive management style? The second thing we look at is meetings and the effectiveness of meetings. We have found that meetings have a massive impact on the culture of an organization. The third thing we look at is the frontline obsession. It's very healthy in a company's culture when everybody listens to the people who have a direct relationship with your customers. And I think especially in the retail space, we see this a lot. People at executive level and strategic level in the organization make decisions about the company without listening to people who deal with the customers on a daily basis. So it's a top-down strategy that gets forced down. There's a beautiful study that was done about this called Blue Ocean Leadership by 2 professors from INSEAD in France. And they developed Blue Ocean Strategy, which they then further developed and came up with Blue Ocean Leadership. And they worked with a British retail group where the staff turnover on the front line was 40%. And after their intervention, that dropped to 11%. And it saved that British retail group $50 million in the first year. And one of the major things they changed was a frontline obsession, changing the culture of the organization to focus on the frontline. And then lastly, it's about listening, Mark. I think that's the 4th thing we look at. So do we have a culture where we really listen to people, where we listen to their input and what they have to offer? We listen to their ideas, the changes they want to make. And I have great stories about listening that I can tell when we talk about our customers. It's funny when you look at these shows on BBC called Back to the Floor and Undercover Boss. When those bosses go undercover and they go and work on the front line in their organizations, the first thing they do when they come back is they fire consultants like me. And they go back and they listen to their frontline staff.
Yeah.
So that's why that is so important.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, great. Thanks, Herman. I'll tell you what, we're getting quite a lot of questions, so I'm going to let you get back. Let's just deal with this one more from Bev Jack. And then, guys, please list your questions. We'll get as many of them done as possible at the end. Bev asks, when considering employee engagement, have you been considering and measuring the impact of the new world of work, hybrid working environment?
Yes. So we have developed in the last 2 years a separate questionnaire that deals with that. So there is an additional assessment that we do for our customers with that. It's a 50-50 with our customers. We find that 50% of the guys we work with want to return to work. The other 50% don't want to return to work. I'm just going to give you a quick example. PwC last year in July, what did they say? Everybody works from home forever. And what happened in January this year, the request was for people to return to the office 3 days a week. So, I think that's the problem with the new world of work and the future of work. It's still emerging. We actually don't know what it's going to look like. Our biggest customer now, it's a pain reintegrating people back into work. It really is. And, they've actually, and I tip my hats to people in facilities management now in the corporate space, because it's really tough to manage. It really is. People in group real estate, I think it's a tough space to be in right now.
Okay. Thanks, Herman. There are several other questions, Herman. We'll get to those towards the end of your session. So maybe you would like to continue with the presentation.
Okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to say too much about the principles, because then you're going to buy the book. How's that? Right. So how I've structured the book is chapter 1 talks about the engagement model. Chapter 2 talks about why intentional leadership. And then I start with the principles. So chapter 3 is about the principle of humility. And a lot of companies talk about the principle, but how do you physically practice humility? You do that by being vulnerable. If you can show vulnerability, then the principle of humility will be a part of your leadership. The impact on your culture will be trust. Okay? So that's how I structured chapter 3. At the end of chapter 3, like with all the other principles, I also have a case study where I explain where we helped the customer with this principle in the past. And then what I also do at the end of each chapter, if you want to dive more into humility, vulnerability, and trust, I recommend a must-have resource. In other words, it'll be a book about humility. In this case, it's the book of John Dixon called Humilitas, which is the Latin word for humility. And he did a remarkable study that spanned, he went into history trying to understand where this concept came from, how it was practiced through the ages, and how it had an impact on humanity. So if you want to do a deep dive at the end of each chapter, I explain exactly what the resource is that you need for this specific principle. So in this chapter, the case study is a guy called Paul. He's a financial director, was the financial manager, and their previous financial director, he was a bit of a terror. He terrorized everybody in the team, and eventually he was fired, and then Paul had to take over. So he had to take over this team where there was no trust, and everybody was, just scared and afraid, and how he had to rebuild the trust as the new financial director. The second principle then is psychological safety. The practice is openness, and the impact on culture is transparency and truth. What's psychological safety about? It's all about interpersonal risk-taking. If I speak up, what will be the consequence for me? And that's why people hide things in a company. And that's why we as consultants know the higher you move up in an organization, the less truth you hear, because people tell their bosses what they want to hear and not what they need to hear. But if you can create psychological safety, and I mean, the research on this is profound. There's a great book by Professor Amy Edmondson from Harvard. It's called The Fearless Organization. and that is the must-have resource I've prescribed for this chapter, where she shows the impact on productivity with psychological safety. We work a lot with psychological safety in the mining sector, especially when it comes to mining safety, because you've got this push for productivity in mining, but you also have safety standards you need to adhere to. And that's a tension to be managed. And sometimes people want to hit their targets for production because then they get bonuses and they neglect safety. So they would hide certain things. Okay. So psychological safety is all about allowing people to speak their mind without, bearing significant consequences for doing that. So it's about not shooting the messenger if you don't like the message. So the practice is openness, and I discuss this in this chapter, how to create that. And then what you get in your company is transparency and truth. You don't have to have meetings before the meetings and meetings after the meetings to actually figure out what the truth is. You know the truth. People have candor. They speak the truth. And it's just wonderful. The case study here is about a lady, Zahara. She was a regional manager for an insurance company, and she took over some regions, and it's incredible, what she had to deal with, people hiding things from her, people not being open, people stabbing each other in the back in this region she had to deal with. And it's all about how she overcame that as a regional manager. Next principle, we need to rehumanize the work environment. And we do that by practicing empathy and listening. And then the impact on your culture will be loyalty and community. I really believe, we should not ask people to sacrifice their humanity at work. And I think sometimes we do. And I think it's so important, and the story I tell at the end of this chapter is a guy called James, who was a brilliant salesman, and then he gets a job at another company as a sales manager. And it was fascinating to see what James went through, because when he took over the sales team as a sales manager, their previous manager was really inhumane. And in this team, they stole clients from each other. It was really a cutthroat environment. And I tell the story about how James, fixed his sales team up here by rehumanizing the sales team, by having empathy, by listening, and how he went about, reestablishing this culture of loyalty and community. The next one is gratitude, one of my favorites. I really believe in gratitude. What you feed the brain with becomes stronger. I think we all know that. I've done a couple of courses in neuro-linguistic programming. So, I'm fairly convinced what you focus on becomes bigger. And if you focus on what you don't have, that is a problem, because then you will realize how big the struggle in your life is. If you focus on what you have, you'll really be a grateful individual. The practice that we found with managers who really drives this principle of gratitude is celebration. They celebrate individuals in the company, but you know what? They don't celebrate their achievements and their performance. What they do celebrate is they celebrate their character. It's funny, we all have birthdays, and that's the biggest day of celebration in our lives. And none of us had anything to do with our birthdays. I mean, that was our parents' fault. It was not our fault, but yet we are celebrated. And I think what I saw with managers is they really take the birthdays of their people seriously. They celebrate them as human beings. And the impact on culture is people feel valued. I know of many companies who have gratitude walls up, and they allow people to go and write down what they are grateful for. So there's some great practices in that chapter. The story I tell in this chapter is about a guy called Doug. He was the owner of a small business, IT company, but he had a couple of narcissist traits, and he took a lot of things for granted, and he was losing his business. He had a high staff turnover, and he was losing his wife in the process. But luckily, we could help him, practice celebration, and realize what he had in life and not take things for granted. And that saved him, his company, and his family, which was great. Next one, integrity. Every company we work with has that up on the wall, integrity. The practice here, though, is accountability and feedback. The story I tell in this chapter is about a guy called Chris, and we met him in a corporate environment. We did an exercise on strategic cascading, and he came to us and he said, man, I've been stuck in middle management for like 15 years. Every time I apply for a job, I don't get the job. And then, with Chris's permission, we started working with his colleagues and his family as well. And what we found is his wife, his children, as well as his colleagues at work said that, he overpromises and he underdelivers. He gets in trouble, so he lies, and he has deceiving behavior. So we had to hold him accountable to that. And everybody, I heard this term the other day used by an executive coach. It's called idiot compassion. When you don't tell people the truth because you don't want to hurt their feelings. And I think sometimes you just have to give people the truth, hold them accountable, give them the feedback so that they can grow and get clarity on what it is that they need to change in their lives for them to have a chance to grow and find a better job or get a promotion or whatever it is. And with Chris, everybody was too nice. Nobody told him what was wrong and why he didn't get the promotions. And eventually, with our intervention, we could do that for Chris. And that had a massive impact in his life. You can read the chapter to see what happened. Right. The next one is authenticity. How do we become more authentic? We have to reflect. Very quickly, an amazing research study, I do mention it in the chapter. They took 100 people over the age of 95, University of Philadelphia, Department of Sociology, asked them one question. If you could live again, what would you do more of? Top 3 answers. They would risk more. If you are 95, you sit on your veranda, you're still alive, you think, I should have risked more. Number 2, they would do more things to leave a legacy. And number 2, they would reflect more. And the researchers were quite astounded and went back to these elderly people and said, why is your number 1 answer reflection? They said, you know what? Once you go beyond 75, you have a lot more time for reflection. And that's when you realize how important reflection is. And once we reflected on our lives, we realized we repeated the same mistakes over and over and over and over again. And if only we took time to reflect earlier in our 30s and 40s, we would not have made so many mistakes. I mean, that's why John Maxwell says humanity rarely finds new ways to fail because the old ways are serving us well. Okay, so, someone in my studies in theology, I read this quote once, that hurry is not from the devil, hurry is the devil. It robs us from so much. We have to make time for reflection. That's when we realize who we are authentically. And that's when we create a culture of awareness. And in this chapter, I tell a story about Jack, who did very well in IT, but he was very involved in the nonprofit sector. And he wanted to make a move from IT to the nonprofit sector. And I talk about his process of awareness, authenticity, and what happened with his life. Right, this is a fascinating one. Resilience. The practice is legitimate suffering. Every executive or senior manager I work with tell me the following: I don't want my kids to suffer like I did. And then I always say to them, well, your suffering did you well. Look at where you are. You should allow your children to suffer. It's very important. Scott Peck talks about legitimate suffering in his book, The Road Less Traveled. I don't know if you've read that book. It's a remarkable book. Scott Peck, I think he wrote it in the late 70s, early 80s. It's a timeless classic. He talks about this concept and how if we don't go through legitimate suffering, we don't develop tenacity and perseverance. And as you all know, we have a mental health crisis in the world. After COVID, I mean, it's just much greater. In South Africa, amongst males, we have the second highest suicide rate in the world. So it's important to pay attention to this in your business. The story I tell in this chapter is one of my clients' wives came to me and said, my son is 26 years old. He still lives with me. He hasn't got a job. He's tried 4 or 5 different degrees. He doesn't pass anything. And then what I picked up is they've never allowed this child to go through any legitimate suffering. And I tell the story about how we helped them. Second last one, innovation. What do we practice? We practice failing fast. Allow people to experiment, learn, make failures, make mistakes. I tell a story here of how Susan in her company, she has awards for people who fail, not for those who succeed, and how it's created this culture of learning and progress. And then the last principle is hope. So what we've picked up with the leaders we work with is the leaders who build hope in their company, they really coach and challenge their people. When do people lose hope? People lose hope if they never fail in life and then suddenly they do fail. They don't know how to deal with that. Or people lose hope if they constantly fail. So it's very important to help people on both sides of the spectrum. So if people lose hope in your company, how do you coach them and challenge them? I work a lot with psychologists, and they have this slogan, which they call, it has to do with map restoration, where they say the map is not the territory. So we all live with maps in our heads that are our paradigms, our perceptions, and those need to be challenged, and we need to be coached so that we can find meaning and purpose in life, and live with more hope. I tell an interesting story in this chapter about a highly specialized team of engineers we worked with, and they were all baby boomers. And then there was this massive gap in this company, and you had a lot of Gen Y engineers that came into this organization. And the baby boomers didn't have any hope because they were so specialized, they couldn't find any other jobs anywhere else, so they held on to their jobs. And then the young Generation Y guys lost hope because they couldn't see a future for themselves in this company with all of these baby boomers hanging around. And they weren't getting the right experience because the baby boomers didn't want to share their experience and knowledge with these young Gen Y individuals. So that's the story I tell in that chapter. So guys, those are the 9 principles and practices in the book. It's a nice leadership workbook. You learn about the principle, you learn about the practice, you see the impact it has on the culture of your organization. And then we also give you a case study and a must-have resource for each of those chapters that you must get if you want to delve deeper into it. Just to give you an idea, we've worked across many sectors in the corporate environment, big businesses, small businesses, and our methodology has worked for all of our customers. It really has. So these are the guys we've basically worked with for the last 18 months. They really keep us busy in terms of organizational behavior and assisting them with that. So Mark, I don't know if there's any other questions before I talk about the book and how to get a hold of that.
Thanks, Herman. We appreciate it a lot. Herman, yeah, let me just go back to the few questions that I put on hold earlier. And I think we've addressed this one, but let me give it to you. How does this module or framework address the lack of liability and accountability of individuals? I do think you addressed that in that principle, but if you wanted to add to that, that was the next question.
Yeah, it was just, I think what addresses that in this model is the strategic cascading.
Right.
So it's helping people, and we spend a lot of time on this because if you get this right, productivity takes care of itself. We help individuals to align their personal work goals with the goals of the team that are aligned with the goals of the company. Okay. And then the performance is easy to manage. We had a customer who just implemented a new performance management system, which you know is a nightmare sometimes.
Right.
But what they found really worked now is that they have clear goals for all the individuals to put into the system to be held accountable for. I think sometimes we cannot hold people accountable and they can duck and dive their responsibility because it's not clear enough.
Okay.
Sorry, Herman.
Yeah.
Sure, who's speaking?
It's Miguel dos Santos. The Columbus team has dropped off. There's
Okay.
something wrong with our network. Our network just died all of a sudden. So maybe just give the guys a chance to get back.
Okay.
We've got our IT guys trying to diagnose it.
Okay. Thanks, Miguel.
Okay.
We'll, if you don't mind, I'll keep dealing with the questions, and then I do have a recording. We can get it to you later. And Hermann has offered the slides to whoever would find that interesting. But thanks, Miguel.
Cool.
Petrus from Risk Recon. Petrus had a comment. Culture is also an outcome of behavior inside an organization. And I once worked with a team in a MNC where some types of meetings were held while standing. And I also did that with a company called Compact. It reduced the amount of meeting time. So thanks for that, Petrus. Joe Mabana says, our country is very diverse culturally, ideologically, religiously, politically, material, etc. All these impact on the workplace and impact on how employees behave. How best do we bridge the gap to get all employees to share in the vision of the company?
It's by driving engagement, Mark.
Okay.
You know, that's it. It's figuring out for each individual in your company how to get them engaged. And you know, I think that's what's so interesting in the diversity that we work with is to see how the model plays out. You know, we met with a client this morning, and we have to rephrase a lot of the statements in our model specifically for this client because of the sector they work in, but also the kind of workers they have in their factories, you know, and not everybody is English proficient, you know, so we then send Zulu and Sotho people into the factories to work with those people to make sure we get their input and what's important to them as well. Because if you don't have your production teams engaged, you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. Thanks, Hermann. And language is so important. Marty has an interesting statement. She says, instant gratification is something that the young generation is thriving. They want to see immediate results. Surely that impacts engagement levels. The level of engagement will not change overnight. So
no, it won't.
Yeah.
And if you look at where this model comes from, it comes from 7 years working with one division, you know, and figuring out where all the engagement problems were. Now, I mean, they were in the 20%. We got them up to 97%. Most companies don't have that kind of problem, you know, but it sometimes it does take time to figure out what the main causes of the disengagement in a company is. Okay.
Thanks, Hermann. We've got a couple of thank yous to do. Do you want to show that last slide, Hermann, and then we'll wrap it up?
Sure. I mean, the book is available on Amazon Kindle. If you want to buy an electronic copy, you can order directly from us. The book's only 280 Rand. That includes VAT, and that'll include your courier as well. And then we do have special prices if you order greater numbers as well. And you can just send your orders to Willem, who's our financial director at ttli.co.za. And then he will then, you know, send you a quote if you buy in bulk. Also, your individual orders, just send it to Willem. He'll take care of it. And then if you want to read more about the book, it's leadwithintent.co.za. That's the page on our company website that deals with the book as well. But, you know, we really wanted to make the book as affordable as possible. We really feel it's good news. We really feel we have an engagement problem in our country. If you look at the statistics of Gallup, we are the worst in sub-Saharan Africa, which is a major concern. And we have an unemployment crisis. So, I really believe if we can help small businesses to get people engaged, to drive profitability, we can create more jobs. And that's what I want to see for the country. So this is a beautiful framework to help you do that in your company.
Herman, there's a couple of notes of thanks. Let me give you those, and then we'll wrap it up for those that need to go. So Rui Fragazo from the South African Portuguese Chamber of Commerce said, thanks, Mark and the teams for the organization. Most important, thank you, Herman, and thanks also to the SAPCC members. Chris Dyke says, awesome chat. Thanks, Mark and Herman. And Carmen says, thanks very much. Rui Marto, thanks, Herman, Mark and Bisa, great presentation. So Herman, there's just would like to say on behalf of the various chambers of commerce, thank you for the time, energy and effort. I know that you and I had to engage quite a bit to get it going. I think our members present got good value today. We thank you sincerely for the time, and thanks to everybody who gave up an hour of their time today. I know there are lots of competing webinars, and on behalf of BISA, the Italian Chamber, the Portuguese Chamber, Swiss, Spanish and the EU chambers, it's been great to spend the hour with you. Just one last small thing, Herman. I'm going to see if I can show you that a colleague, friend, and mentor has written a book called Transformation by Design by Ian Clark, who's present today. And I will send you an invitation at a later stage to a webinar to talk about transformation by design. Oh, bless you, whoever that was. Guys, thank you very much. Herman has made the slides available. You'll also get them through Willem or through the email that you came to me on. I would be happy to send those to you at a later stage. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your presence. Be safe, everybody. Herman, thanks a lot.
Thank you, everybody. All the best with your businesses.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mark.
Bye-bye. Bye, Dev.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Enjoying down there in
Bye-bye.
Durban. Cheers, everybody.
Bye.
Be good, Peters.
Thanks, Mike.
That will be difficult.
Thank you, Mike.